thank you so much.
Yeah, you guys all came.
We should let. Welcome to the first ever Brettcon celebration.
Yes. This is all because of you.
Yes. We have a lot to get to today, so we're gonna get there. But we just want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for supporting the show, and everything we do today is for Mind UK. Every autograph, every T-shirt, all the money is going to Mind UK. I want to just remind everybody of that. So support a great cause.
Buy lots of stuff.
In the name of Jeremy. Yes.
Plus, we don't want to have to take it home with us.
Just before we get started, just a couple maybe housekeeping things, David.
Toilets.
That's how we're going to open this thing.
You can tell I'm not the professional here. I don't use microphones. This is why none of you really know me. Toilets.
It's okay.
Toilets. Down the stairs. And there's men's and women's downstairs. Teas and coffees are now ready, which is great timing because you're now all in here. I do apologise for that.
What? I'm Luke, that's Gus, and that's David.
Yes.
We have name badges.
I say we just kick this thing off. I mean, you guys good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay.
This is the last you'll see of me on here.
David Yule, everybody.
David Yule. Toilets.
Okay. Well, without further ado then, our very first panel is, you guys all know this, you listen to our podcast, but this show wouldn't have happened without people behind the camera. I mean, yeah, we're celebrating Jeremy, we're celebrating David Burke, Edward Hardwick, but so many wonderful people behind the camera are who made this thing possible. And today we have some wonderful people with us. So help me in welcoming, we have Kayt Turner, wardrobe, we have
Esther Dean, wardrobe, costume designer. We have Lawrence Jones, director of photography, right here. We have Martin Kay, David E. from the sound department. Everybody come on out. Come on out, come on in.
Welcome everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Let's just start at the beginning. I mean, Granada, 1984. I mean, a studio at the height of its power. Many of us weren't there. But tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how did Granada at that time compare to the BBC or Yorkshire or any of the other companies? Was there a tangible difference, or was it were they all the same, and we just happened to all love Granada so much because of Sherlock Holmes?
Well, I guess the first thing is that Granada was just a regional company, whereas the BBC is national. So obviously the BBC does a lot of big things. They're very diverse.
Yeah.
Some of the regional companies tended to do just their little local programs and maybe one or two things for the network. Granada did try to sort of emulate the BBC in terms of doing a wide range of productions. Towards the end of the 70s, they'd started with the idea of doing things on a big scale. So Brideshead Revisited was probably their first big production, where they had people like Laurence Olivier in it. It took about a year to produce.
Okay.
Based on the success of that, they did The Jewel in the Crown. That was another big series, 13 1-hours, the sort of thing that normally the BBC would do.
Right.
And Sherlock Holmes was one of the next things.
Was Sherlock like a prestige project to try to step up to that level, or was it?
I mean, it really was a prestige project. I mean, they were looking for Conan Doyle to sort of really reinvigorate that sort of story that's been done many, many times on film before. But I always remember working with Jeremy Brett on The Good Soldier, which was done 2 years earlier, which was a single drama. And very successful at that time, but that was a one-off. And I remember then that Michael Cox and David Plowright were looking to cast the Sherlock. And David Plowright said, we need somebody like Jeremy Brett. And once he said that, the casting department said, well, they looked around, but yes, the best person we can find is Jeremy Brett. And that's how they first approached him for that, really. But I worked on The Good Soldier, and we were on vacation in Germany because I was part of the camera crew, and Jeremy just had that bearing. Lieutenant Ashburn and this Edwardian sort of tragedy-drama, really, and he just found a fantastic actor to work with.
So you saw it coming?
Yeah, really, really well.
we're sitting amidst this slight recreation of the wonderful work you guys did. And I should have said earlier, you guys will all have a chance in between the panels to, there's a little pathway you can walk back here to see. But we have a great many original props, wardrobe items, courtesy of the people on stage today. So frankly, let's just take half a second and say thank you.
Yes. We will have our friend Jim from the British Museum down here in between, so we can kind of talk you through what everything is, because a few of the things are reproductions and a few of the things are original. So
much of it is originals, and I don't know where to begin. But frankly, well, let's start. Lawrence, you were kind enough to bring the poster. This is not one of our recreations. This is one of the original posters from above the fireplace. Tell us a quick story about that, Lawrence.
That was really towards the end of the series when I spoke to the prop buyer, David Brown. He said, I actually have 3 examples of that because if it gets destroyed, we need a replacement. And by the end of the series, the production buyer said, well, look, you can have these if you want. So myself and my gaffer that worked on the illustrious client, they said, well, you can have these. But Jeremy was happy enough to sort of sign them for us. And he wrote on them. You can have a look later on. You'll see at the very bottom, it says, onwards and upwards, Jeremy. Yeah. 1992. Signed, good luck to the boys, really.
That's great.
It was fantastic. And, we had that and we had them framed. It was a wonderful thing for him to give to us.
But there's just a little story about that picture. I was the boom swinger, so the man that swung the microphone around. And one of the big problems with that picture was it had glass in it. So you had to keep taking the glass out. So if you look very carefully at some of the episodes, you'll see some have got glass in the frame, some haven't. And eventually it was so much hassle that we just left the glass out of it. But depending on where the camera was and the mic was, obviously got a big reflective surface. So it just became a real pain. So it's a little thing to watch out for. You might even see reflections. Probably not actually, but.
Could I lead on with that story that when I was about to get my chance, I worked as an operator on 5 of the episodes, and I've eventually got promoted to director of photography. I was going forward to light the illustrious client, and I was going on to the recce for the set, and a senior previous director of photography came up to me and said to me, young man, you will thank me because I've just been onto the set, and for my episode I've had all the glass taken out of all the pictures on the set because it was such a pain for the sound department and my poor operator that we had reflections, so I had all the glass removed, and you'll thank me for that. So I said, oh, well, thank you very much. So that afternoon I walked onto the set with my director, ready to look at our particular episode, and I walked around the set. It wasn't lit properly, it was just had the house lights, but it looked so dead. It looked flat and dead. And the art director said to me, what do you think? This particular DOP I can't name, he said, he's had it all taken out, it's easy now. I said, put it all back. Put it all back. Because a set with no reflections doesn't have any depth, and it looked completely flat and dead to me. So the art director said, well, blimey, we just had a crew of 3 people spending 4 days to take all the glass out for you. I said, put it all back.
Yeah.
So all the glass went back in, and I said, we'll just work a little harder on set.
And often what I had to do was to completely be covered in a complete black, what they call bolt and twill, which was often you found in a film set, which is a black heavy
material, like the curtains are almost.
Used in the theatre business, and its name comes from Bolton in Lancashire, where I lived for a while, and it was where they used to manufacture that textile. So I often, with the help of the ladies beside me here, would have to dress up in almost like a black skirt and top, so that my body couldn't be reflected in that, because Lawrence is built to have that. But because it does look spectacular, and I agree totally that having reflections, having depth, because the whole thing with that set, there was so much care and attention. And Mike Grimes had really done such a wonderful job. Everything was aged to perfection. It just looked incredible. And it was really nice for me and emotional in a way, seeing some of these props, because I was a boom swinger. The microphone that I was using, it was virtually a closed set. We never really, apart from I think one occasion, ever took a wall out. So you had the set built in a Victorian warehouse, which ceiling was probably about 15 feet high. It was bricks. It was all had been a bonded warehouse. So the sound, from a sound quality, it was pretty good. But it was incredibly hot with all these heavy lights there. And both Jeremy used to perspire a lot, and I did, because you were standing up with your arms in the air for 10 minutes at a time, swinging a microphone around. It was kind of quite a hostile environment. It was very hot. And interestingly, in the lunch breaks, what often used to happen was that Jeremy would go and sleep on the little bed in the bedroom, and I would lay out my script on the settee and have a nap as well in the main Baker Street rooms. And that was just because when I started to be a boom swinger, one of the things I suddenly realised was if I was going to be good at this job was actually to learn the script. So every night of my life that I worked on Sherlock, I used to learn all the lines for the next day, because that enabled me, if I knew who was going to speak, then what I could do is watch for the shadows, watch for the camera, watch for movements. Some people like Jeremy were absolutely brilliant. He never missed a head turn, because obviously if you've got a microphone, you've done rehearsal, and somebody turns in a different direction, the mic's not in the right place. He was absolutely fantastic with that. But there were many times in a lunch hour when it went cool and the lights were off. Jeremy would be sleeping on the back bed. I'd be on the settee with all the script laid out for me, and I would have a little bit of a nap. It was a lovely memory of us both just relaxing on set.
There's a story I think we've told on the podcast, but Gus and I used to, we're very into the hats, obviously, so we'll do maybe a little bit of hat talk for a second, but we used to just dream about the idea of being able to speak to Esther and just talk about costumes at some point. And now she's here, and there's this silhouette kind of looming over us, and I wondered if you could talk about that.
Yes, when it first came up, I'd worked with Jeremy and Ken. I think it was on a Kingsley Amis show, and but we had a talk, and I deliberately left my completely blank. I hadn't actually read any of Sherlock Holmes. I did a lot of reading when I was a little girl, but Sherlock Holmes had passed me by. Anyway, and I deliberately not sort of looked at anything, although I used to see the Basil Rathbone ones, which most of you would be far too young to have seen. But when I talked to Jeremy, he wanted to follow the Paget drawings, so that was the basis of all the costumes. Some of the stuff I've still got. I had to replace some of them, and Jeremy, he was on I think it was lithium or something, and he used to go up and down in weight, so I actually had 3 different sizes of a frock coat made for him, so that and you take one look at him first thing in the morning, whichever size it was. And I don't think he ever realised that.
But this is an original.
That's original, yes.
Yes.
All the stuff that's on here, there's an overcoat, and right over up on the table over there, I think it was my favourite, what was Sign of 4, and I've got John Thor's wooden leg. When I say I've got John Thor's wooden leg, people always say, oh, well, we knew he had a limp, but so it's over there.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of costumes that kind of turn into props, Kayt Turner, I remember you telling us you loved the idea of making a high-vis suit for a dog.
Oh, yes. When we came to I was doing The Hound of the Baskervilles, and the director asked me to make a frock for the dog. A high-vis one they wanted. And I was very clear that frocks for dogs were not in my remit. That was special effects. And they did keep pushing it a bit, and there was no way that was going to happen. You know, that's special effects, and I'm not doing a fitting on a dog. Thank you very much.
Wouldn't it have been fun, though? Wouldn't it have been fun? No?
Esther said that you had 3 sets made for Jeremy. The coats wasn't enough. I can't remember which episode it was, but he had put on a lot of weight, and his trousers, no way were they going to fit. So I thought I was quite being diplomatic and said, Jeremy, I think we need to get you a new pair of trousers. So I'll just whip the tape measure round you. No, wasn't going to happen. And so in the end, I went down to the costumiers, to the lovely, lovely Ron Davis, the tailor, and said, Jeremy needs a new pair of trousers. And Ron said to me, so how much bigger do they need to be? And I did that.
Wow.
And Ron Davis, God love him, made a new pair that were absolutely perfect for him.
Did you? I mean, you worked on different episodes.
Yeah.
But how much did you two communicate during
Oh,
the
yeah.
series?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I know, I sort of assisted you, I think. I assisted on Scandal in Bohemia, I think.
Oh, should we tell that one?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Let's hear it.
We were doing it was Scandal in Bohemia. It was my first one, and we were in Liverpool, and it was a night shoot. I don't know anybody, any of you. Was that you? Right. And there was loads of extras, and all the extras had to change in garages in a street. And so we were up and down the street. We had the wonderful Gail Honeycutt, and we were up and down the street in Liverpool, and it was the only time I've ever been entrusted with a walkie-talkie. Frocks weren't grown up enough to be given equipment like that. So we were walking up the street, seeing to the extras in their garages by torchlight, and suddenly Trina was assistant floor manager, and she could be a bit scary sometimes. She was very clear. And over the walkie-talkie came Trina saying very clearly, Kayt Turner, to set, please. And we were so terrified, we jumped over somebody's hedge and hid in their garden. I was so petrified I'd done something wrong.
But it was nothing. It was nothing.
I was going to say about that, just very briefly, Liverpool in the 80s had some grand, beautiful houses. Most
They
of
looked like London.
were-
Manchester doesn't have houses that looks like London.
They did it, and most of them were let out to students. So the thing was, when they realised that we were filming, they did their best to disrupt it by switching on lights and making a noise, only because the first student got paid 20 quid. And suddenly it went round that there was some money to be made. So we had to pay all these students to turn their radios off, to stop switching lights off. It was great. It was a great bit of fun. I mean, they kind of loved it. It was a bit of sport, and they knew there was a way of getting an extra few bob. But many of the classic sequences were filmed in Liverpool for Sherlock because it had such grand properties.
But you guys, I mean, you were all there very early on. Lawrence, you were on Dancing Men, which was the second episode.
That's correct.
I'm curious, what was the... Was there any kind of a plan or an edict in terms of what the look of the show would be? Obviously, the BBC would do the kind of thing where it was on videotape, in certain scenes, interiors, usually exteriors were filmed. Granada didn't do that. Sherlock Holmes didn't do that. I mean, thank God. I mean, that. But I mean, was there anything like we're going to use these lenses? We're gonna establish the costumes early. I mean, how was it from the very beginning? Was there any kind of talk of that kind?
Well, it was to do with the Paget sort of set the house style, really, how it looked.
Yeah.
They were quite authentic to that sort of period, really. But there was a house style. Each director had his or her own style, what they really wanted to do. So, within reason, they could do that. And in terms of the optics, we could choose as a DOP. We'd choose our own lenses.
You would, okay.
Prime lenses or zoom lenses or a mixture, whichever the drama required.
It doesn't really feel different. I mean, it feels very consistent.
So because people did really, stay within that particular house style, as it were.
Yes, I mean, when I was designing things, one would obviously always talk to the... discuss things with the director, On the whole, and also with the designer, because and certain of the productions we did later on with Peter Hammond. I'd talk with Peter Hammond, and we'd settle on a paint. He loved Tissot, everything black and white and a touch of red, and often we'd. There's one, and I think I've put a photograph of it. But, I think it was in Master Blackmail, and we were in a. I don't know where it was. It was a nightclub or something, but we'd settled. It was Klimt, and so everything was painted, and the background. And I did it together with the. I can't remember. It might have been Tim Wilding. So we painted the background and the costumes at the same time, and there was another one. Later, Three Gables, I think it was, where we had there was a fancy dress. It was at Lime Hall. It was very cold, and actually it did Jeremy no good. He got very cold that night. But we had all these different fancy dress groups, and Peter and I had gone through, and they were all based on paintings. I know there was a Fragonard. Swing. They were all. I could go through them all, but I can't remember.
Peter was.
I used to find it great fun. It was really nice to be able to do that.
Yeah. Peter was a great draftsman himself, and of course his references to art were superb. But one of his penchants was the glass shots and reflections. He was the master reflection, and he would, he would actually. Peter's preference would, if he could, on set, if he could find a reflection. We'll shoot the whole scene there, in that reflection, so we won't point the camera at the actors. We'll shoot this piece of glass here, or the silver salver, or what have you. That was his special thing. But with the great thing with Peter, on the Sign of Four, we did, it's quite old-fashioned now, we did a glass shot of what would have been the Edwardian Thames with all the sailing ships. A matte painting, and it was physically a piece of glass which was probably about 8 foot across. Brought down in a props truck. We're on the foreshore at Greenwich, and two big, heavy lighting stands lined up with the camera. The camera was probably about 10 feet further away, with a particular focal length of lens to mat in the sort of Edwardian London skyline, and that worked really out. It was great to shoot at such an old-fashioned technique, which worked. We were shooting then on 35mm. Worked really, really well.
Yeah. So that would have been a physical piece of glass sitting here. That's
right. Yeah, with the skyline, all the sailing ships painted in the top third, and then the bottom half. Our actors could drop down below, run across the foreshore, pause, and then run out of frame. And towards the end, there's a chase on the Thames. We couldn't obviously shoot. We shot some of it on the Thames, but we actually finished off the denouement where they're captured, and. It was really part of the Norfolk Broads on the River Yare, and they're caught in the floodlight. Jonathan Small goes overboard and crawls up the bank, and he's captured in the spotlight and is trained on by Jeremy with a revolver towards the end. Game over. Now, John Thor said to me, he said, and Peter Hammond, he said, look, this is January, we're all freezing cold, it's night shoot. He said, look, Peter, he said, I'll do this shot for you. He said, we don't need to do it. I'm going to do it. I said, well, Peter said, well, we'd like you, John, to crawl towards camera. Lawrence is going to set up a low angle here through the reeds, looking out, and you're going to, you hit the water, there's a floodlight on the back of you, picking out in silhouette, and you're going to crawl towards camera, game over, exhausted. He said, Peter, I've spoken to the safety divers and the safety crew along that foreshore. He said, it's not a great place, really. The divers said, actually, it's slightly tidal. There could be needles, condoms, and other things here. He said, you're asking your actor to physically crawl through the mud towards camera. He said, yes. And he said, and John would like to do it. John said, I will do it, but once. One time only. Okay, so I said, so we set the camera up, and I said to my focus puller, I said, get your marks out, get ready here. Freezing cold. Right, let's roll camera, and I said, we've got one chance at this, one go, no mistakes. And we, clapperboard goes on, swing around, and there we see in the silhouette, splash in the water. And John thought through, at about sort of 3 or 4 foot deep, he's coming towards shore and acting his heart out. As he gets towards it, and in the top of frame, I'm looking at it, and I can see the wooden leg has become detached. and it's now floating behind him. John Thor is acting his heart out. It's beautiful. It's getting better and better. My focus puller's doing a fantastic job. He's only going to do it the one time, and I'm thinking, I'm operating with a gear. I'm thinking, if anything goes wrong normally on a film set, the cost of you will stop and start again. Yeah. But the actor said to me, I'm going to do this once and once only. Yeah. So I'm watching the actor coming towards us. It's beautiful. It's in focus. It's a beautiful performance. The silhouette of Holmes in the background holding the revolver. But my eyes going towards this floating miniature log, which is the wood. I'm thinking, right, he gets towards us, ends up almost a close-up shot. It's fantastic, and then collapses in exhaustion into the mud. Mud on face, mud on hands. Cut. Peter Hammond said, "How was that?" I said, "It was fantastic." Now, in the modern world, something like that is easily fixed.
Right.
In the digital world, you can fix anything that's floating in the frame. But it's being picked up by heavy backlit, our light really, moonlight, and it's obviously a floating the leg. But I mean, in the modern world, that can be fixed. But back then in the day, I'm thinking we can't stop.
I can add to that because poor John Thor. And one of the things that he didn't realise when he took the part, knew there was going to be a wooden leg, but of course you think of Long John Silver, and Long John Silver has a crutch. Mm-hmm. And I had to say to John, it's part of the story, you can't have a crutch, because there's only one
footprint.
We filmed the end when he'd come back into Baker Street. I'd said to the recce people, what's it like down there? I'm very hot on the colour of mud and stuff. I said, can you bring me up a bucket of mud? So, how wet is John going to get? Oh, they said, not very wet. He'll just jump off and he'll be on the side. They'd seen it when the tide was in. Of course, when we were filming, the tide was out, and it was this awful mud flat. John's leg went off, and Peter Hammond was shouting, shoot the leg, so that you would get... And I was saying, no, it's not it's not continuity. And we then had to get the leg back onto John. And we were sinking in, there was Don Seo, who was the dresser. We'd got John on a tiny bit of cardboard, sinking into the mud. I was on one side of John. Poor Don was trying, and he got welly boots on. And every time he tried to move, his feet came out of the welly boots. And everybody would, and they were all, hurry. And we had to you had to strip John off to get the leg back on him. Anyway, when we were staying in a hotel in Great Yarmouth, and we'd taken over the ballroom, which was down in the basement, and it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and we got to get him back clothed again. We got no means of getting it dry. We were. How are we going to get it all dry? And we're trying to iron and things like that. Suddenly John appears in the door with a big bottle of whiskey. And we had a very, very nice evening. Polishing off the bottle of whiskey, trying to get John's clothes dry. But then, of course, if you look at it properly, the continuity between him back in Baker Street, which we'd done before, and I'd been told he won't get very wet, it actually is very, it doesn't work really.
Never noticed it. It looks great.
But I never forget Peter Hammond saying, shoot the leg.
Well, having actually had a chance to examine the leg, how did you lash it onto him?
Do you know, I was looking at it the other day, and I think, I don't know.
It's just
I can't remember.
Well, did you?
But I had about 3 different ones. Yeah. And when he was the one he wore in Baker Street at the end, because he was supposed to take it off, and there was no, so there was a screw, so he could just screw off the bottom bit of it.
But did you design the leg, or did props make the leg for you?
It was a sort of joint effort.
Okay.
It was.
I was just wondering if you had ever carved wood before in your. But
I once had my father make for Jack Shepherd. He was playing Gramsci, some built up, and he had short legs, so, and instead of him just being on his knees, we sort of built something up so that you'd have his leg, so that he wouldn't look as if he was just walking on his knees. That was, but,
Talking of the sign of 4, I take it you're all familiar with the sign of 4? Yeah. 35mm special. This particular night was also the demise of Tonga.
Right.
Yeah. Which we shot again in that canal area, or the Norfolk Broad.
Kieran Shaw.
Young Kieran Shaw. Kieran Shaw.
Yeah.
Fabulous guy. He was coming. He said, "I'm on later." And he said, "He looked a bit." I said, "You okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm dressed." He said, "He goes into the water." And what Peter Hammer wanted to see the end, the demise of Tonga. And he goes past we're on a camera launch. We got our camera launch set up. He wanted Tonga to float past and then go under the surface and drown. We had safety divers, about 4 of them around that night. Again, January, freezing cold. And during the earlier meal break, I said, he said, "Yeah, I'm on later on." He said, "I'm a bit nervous. I can't swim." So he said, "We've got safety divers." So they had him. We had various sort of flotation devices, this, that, and the other. And it was only a small guy, but he looked quite padded out. He said, "I'm padded out." He said, "Yeah." I said, "You okay?" He said, "Yeah." They said, "The bar's open." He said, "I'm have a Bacardi and Coke was his drink." He said, "I've had a few Bacardi. I'm going to, just to keep warm, and I'll have another Bacardi and Coke. I'm on later on tonight. It was the night shoot. It was quite late. I'll be in the water about 11 o'clock tonight." So we get ready. He said, "Yeah, okay, it's the demise of Tonga, right?" So we set up for this shot. Peter Hammer says, "I want to come past. I want to see him go by us. I want the safety divers to be around him, and I want him to go under the surface." So, right, okay. Clapperboard goes on. Take 1. He floats past. Doesn't go under. Peter said, "Well, he needs to go under the surface. He's now been shot. He's been demise of Tonga. Go under. It's the end of Tonga." Take 2. Floats past. Take 3. Buoyancy aids. Smiling. Float. I think the Bacardi and Cokes had got to him by this stage. Floats past. I said, "Right, cut." I said, "Peter," I said, "Get the safety divers. They're going to have to physically pull him underneath the surface." So we had 4 safety divers just under the surface, and they got hold of him with all his padded stuff, still slightly smiling and sort of the Richter of death. And on cue, Peter said, "Right, go." Turn the camera over. We pan right to left, and they drag him physically. 4 divers pull him under the surface, and we get the shot.
Yeah.
Couldn't swim.
Yeah.
But after a few Bacardis and Cokes, maybe you could.
So what would that have been like to run sound on the river? Like, how would that have even happened?
I was going to ask you that because there's a number of instances in the show where I'm thinking of the Falls of Reichenbach as well, where it's loud, and you were there. Were you at Falls of Reichenbach?
I was,
Yeah.
I was,
and you were there too.
I was up at the top. I was fixing the harnesses and things on the... and stuntmen only do a stunt once.
Right.
They did it about half a dozen times.
Wow.
And they were up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
And then we were throwing dummies over. I mean, it was everything.
But what was the biggest challenge with sound? I mean, was there a lot of ADR? Was there a lot of? You guys seem to do a pretty good job of on.
One of the things with Granada was that we worked together, the camera crew and the sound crew, to make wherever possible the chance to record original sound.
Yeah.
There's partly budgetary as well, but actors always loved the fact that they would get residuals to come back and do properly. Most people really didn't like to have to replace the dialogue. So on the whole, there were certain areas we used to use radio lights. Very simple really, Martin. I first remember when we set off doing the Sherlocks. It was basically an arbor and 2 microphones. There weren't any fancy mixing desks on location because what you were really doing was getting the purest possible sound you could, and it was up to the track layers and the double mixers to actually fit all that together.
Right.
The more complicated, if you combine tracks or try to mix anything, it made it extremely difficult when you come to post-production. But I'd say probably 90% of all the sound that was done on Sherlock's was original sound.
That's great. Yeah.
Which was, quite difficult when you were filming a Victorian.
Well, of course. Yeah.
In Manchester or in Liverpool or in wherever.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is that there wasn't a budget for doing post-sing,
Really?
after recording. The expectation was you would get the sound live and they would use that sound.
Yeah.
and most of it was recorded in mono. That was the standard thing. People just had mono, quarter-inch tape recorders, Margaret tape recorders, usually just using one microphone into them.
Yeah.
That's how most of it is done with a boom operator.
Yeah.
We were told, director Paul Annette, I think it was Paul Annette who said it, that he would push for 3 weeks of rehearsals.
Well, Jeremy pushed for that.
Well, Jeremy pushed for it.
Yeah. But I mean,
that was late.
The ever did 3-week rehearsals.
That was later on to be the first series. There was about a week or 2 weeks in between. That was why we alternated with costume design and all that, because you couldn't. But it was towards the end, the last lot that he did. He insisted on, because he really was not well. He was suffering from various different things.
Earlier Esther mentioned dresser Don, and I would just like to say that without the huge commitment, I think, from all of the crew, especially the dressers, and the genius and expertise of the costumiers, this wouldn't have happened. They'd all been standing there naked, basically.
Yeah.
That would be a different show.
But everybody went more than the extra mile for us. I mean, the genius of John Bright at Cosprops was just unbelievable. And
actually, it was jolly useful that Tim Angel was only just beginning.
Yes,
so he was quite keen on
yes, and Tim at Angels and Ron Davis. They were so generous to us. And, we had budget, and sometimes you would go over budget, and you think, oh, God, I'm in trouble here. But then you had they worked with you, and so you might go over on one, but you would go under on another one, so it all worked out. Yeah. And the accountants never knew.
Yes, and I used to have discussions with Tim, well, how much have you got? I mean, we used to fix it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But, they had a fire at Angel.
Oh.
It was just off Cambridge Circus. I think they just did fancy dress.
That was me.
But what was lovely was Jeremy went round first thing in the morning with bouquets of flowers. He didn't know what to do, so he just went round to Angels and gave them all these flowers while they worked out how they were going to solve the problem of the fire.
There was 2 fires then, because I was filming something else in Paris, and I came back on the Friday. We came back on the Friday night, and I went into work on the Saturday morning to get ready for the next week's filming, and the money guy...
I think it probably was the same.
Was it right? The money guy... Oh, yes, it would have been, yeah. The money guy came in and said, I've got your ticket and here's money. And I said, why? What's that? And there'd been a fire. And all my costumes... It was confessional, that's right, with Robert...
Stevens?
No. Oh, no, I worked with him. He was lovely. When I worked with him, we used to have a shapely calf contest every morning. This was the year of the French in Ireland. And so it was all period stuff. Yeah. And, we used to have... they used to parade up and down in the mornings, and we used to have shapely calf contests.
Well, as we, and again, it's, I know you guys have so many stories, and again, we've spoken to some of you, and some of these interviews we've been able to share, and there's still many more that we're going to share. But before we have to wrap up this particular conversation, just really quickly, if I guess we can start on this side, if you have any quick favorite memory, or one of them of your time on Granada, your time with Jeremy, your time on Sherlock Holmes, what's the best of times?
I suppose for me, it really, then I moved on to sort of lighting and The Illustrious Client, really. Yeah. It was a fantastic episode. I don't know if I'm familiar with The Illustrious Client. Yeah, with Anthony Valentine and Jeremy, both sort of vying for, is this my light? No, this light's my light. And was slightly barking at the time, but Tim Sullivan, our young director, was slightly scared at the time of Jeremy, because Jeremy sort of loved him. He said, "Oh, this young talent," and we were rehearsing, I think it was in Tatton Park on a particular scene, where there's a big trade-off between the two characters, and Jeremy comes in and said, there's too much dialogue here, too much dialogue in this scene, it's too heavy. What if I come in? And he glanced up, and we're in an armory room in Tatton, and up on the wall are two swords, crossed swords. And Jeremy said, "What if I grab at one of the swords and we go on guard?" And Anthony Valentine said, "Oh, great idea. And I'll grab the other one, and we'll play the whole scene on guard and circle each other, giving the odd..." And Tim Sullivan looked at, he said, "Blimey, and what do you think, Tim?" And Tim, sort of for a moment, was a bit sort of caught rabbit in the headlights. He said, "It's a great idea, guys, but what if the swords are invisible?" And Jeremy looked round. He said, "Invisible? The boy's a genius." Fabulous idea. It's fantastic. I love it. I mean, I'm sort of sat in the corner watching and listening to all this. It's excuse the language, it's an effing genius.
Wonderful.
So young Tim sort of talked his way out of that one and did rather well, and I thought that was a lovely moment.
Wonderful. Martin, what's your favorite memory? You only have one, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, probably the thing I remember best was the trip to the Wackerbark Falls to do the final problem. But not so much going for falls. The best bit for me was the fact that they didn't have enough room in the base hotel, which was the Sherlock Holmes hotel. So all the main cast and the main crew were staying there, but they ran out of space. So I was in an old kind of Swiss chalet, one of these sort of wooden buildings, along with some of the props guys. And at first it looked a bit intimidating, but they really took us to their heart. It was a family-run place, and I think that the parents were away towards the end, and it was three daughters running it. And they laid on a party for us at the end in the wine cellar. Now, would you trust a Granada crew in a wine cellar? But we were all very well behaved. And it was just a magical few days with that.
That's wonderful.
I think we all ended up in that.
That's where the party was.
I think so, yes.
David, what do you recall?
Probably a couple of things. Personal things. One day on set early on, Jeremy said to me, "David," he said, "just stand there. I want to do something." And I thought, because the boot hole was always measured to the length I needed it, I was just stood there often holding the boot because you couldn't lay it down or anything. And he said, "You're beginning to get bent shoulders." He said, "And I'm going to have to stand up in a minute." And he said, "This is a boom swinger's back, by the way." He said, "Now I'm going to hold your hair." He said, "I want you to, every time I see you, whenever you come in, so I just want to imagine that you can stand like that." He said, "I'll be watching you." And he did Alexander technique. And every time you start to see music, you come and say, "Right, David, we'll go through these little exercises. You need to do a bit of it." Lovely. And I think because his son was called David, for some reason, he sort of, he had a very personal relationship with everything, and he knew everybody's name on set. And he always asked about how your family are or what you're doing, and that was really fabulous. And briefly with Peter Hammond, who I absolutely adored. Mike Cox, executive producer, didn't quite like didn't like Peter's, some of his kind of more bizarre ways of working. But like Hitchcock, he had a beautifully drawn out image of each scene and each shot and just carry around with it. And it was just magic. His imagination and whatever was great. And on Sign of Fall, we did actually do a little preview. We went to London, if you remember that, Lawrence.
We did,
went
yes.
to the Phoenix Cinema in Charing Cross Road, and we ran that, and that was the first time I got a credit. And Peter was sat next to me, and the name of it came up, and he said, "Do you like that?" So I said, "Well, Peter, that was really sweet." So very nice. And interestingly, just about Granada set off as a company that owned cinemas in London. That was their big history. And the Phoenix Theatre was built by Siebert as his first theatre as well. They came to Manchester because looked at the rain map of the UK, and they thought it rains a lot in Manchester, so people will watch television. So that's why Granada supposedly went for the franchising.
Nice.
Many memories. And the other thing is basically we were a family.
Yeah.
It's quite emotional for me because it's like meeting distant relatives today.
That-
It was a very neat group of people that we really got.
That's the difference between, for me, having worked for the BBC and Granada. Granada treated you, it was like a family, and the BBC didn't.
Yeah.
And so it was lovely. It was a very different feel.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Oh dear.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You're up. It's you.
I suppose one of my favourite memories is working on Scandal with Gail Honeycutt. And I'd done her dresses at Cosprop and with the genius John Bright. And I was watching them film her waltzing with the King of Bohemia and the blindfolded musicians. And I looked at it and I thought, well, flip me. I've just created my own fantasy for somebody else.
Lovely. Wonderful. Esther, you have the final word.
Oh dear. I mean, I have so many memories because I did the very first one and I did the very last one. And little did I think when I did the first one that 10 years later or so one would be still working on it and still finding it. There were still things to explore and it was really good. And of course, I mean, sadly, Jeremy died, and I think I'm the only person here who actually went to his funeral and his memorial. Did you go to his memorial service?
Yes, St Martin's in the...
At St Martin's, but he also had. It was in South London somewhere, and we all met up in. It was just round the corner from where he lived.
Clapham.
In Clapham, yes.
One little brief thing about the memorial service, his brother gave a tribute to Jeremy. And if you remember in Scandal Bohemia, Jeremy dressed up as it was almost like was it like a vicar or I can't remember. Yes, it was a vicar.
Yeah.
And Jeremy insisted on doing a lot of his own makeup on those kind of things. But there was this brother, and he looked identical. So Jeremy was taking his brother's looks, the way he spoke and everything in that moment, and copied it for the film. It was actually just a total revelation, but very nice to see.
Yes. And it's very sad that during his lifetime he wasn't, and I don't know why Granada didn't nominate him and make sure that because I was a member of BAFTA at that time, and year after year I used to nominate him as best actor, but he never ever and I don't know why that didn't happen. I think it was because they thought it was just a bread and butter show. It wasn't like because I did Jewel, which had lots of kudos. I think they just said, oh, it's another detective series, and I don't think they really appreciated.
BAFTA or no BAFTA, he's remembered, and you guys are the unsung heroes of this show, all masters of your trade. And it wouldn't be what it was without everyone here. So thank you all so much.